Have you ever noticed how worry disguises itself as love? You say you're just concerned, but deep down, you're afraid of losing, of being unseen, of being replaced. Worry is not care, it's control wearing a holy mask. When worry takes the throne of your heart, discernment is dethroned. You stop hearing clearly, not from the person you love and not from God. You start assuming, reacting, accusing. Worry whispers, they're pulling away. And before truth has time to speak, your fear has already written the conclusion. That's how many relationships die, not by betrayal, but by the slow corrosion of suspicion. When your peace is stolen, love becomes a battlefield. You begin to interpret silence as rejection and distance as abandonment, yet sometimes God allows silence to heal the noise in you. Peace is not the absence of trouble, it is the awareness of divine order in the midst of it. But you cannot perceive divine order when your soul is in chaos. Worry circuits wisdom. You start moving from impulse, not insight. You make emotional decisions that your spirit never approved. You call it following your heart, but it's really running from fear. When you're anxious, you pray for confirmation, but you're too noisy to hear the answer. And so, God waits not because he's late, but because you're loud. The moment your heart quiets, discernment returns like a floodlight. You begin to see that not everyone leaving you was rejection. Some were divine evacuation. You realize that God sometimes subtracts to protect your peace. The mind governed by worry cannot see that. You'll call peace boring and chaos chemistry. You'll chase those who disturb you and ignore those who build you. That's the deception of an anxious soul. It confuses drama for depth. Psychology calls it attachment anxiety. Scripture calls it lack of trust. When peace is gone, you become addicted to emotional adrenaline. You measure love by how much it hurts, not how much it heals. But hear me, what you call passion may just be trauma speaking loudly. Worry steals your capacity to love from wholeness. It turns relationships into negotiations. If you text me, I'll believe you care. That's not love. That's insecurity seeking oxygen. True love cannot survive in an anxious heart. It suffocates under the weight of imagined offenses. Relationships require two healed hearts, not two half-healed wounds trying to bandage each other. Every time worry rules, trust dies. Every time trust dies, communication collapses. And when communication collapses, love becomes memory. But here is the redemptive truth. Peace can be restored. God never designed relationships to function without his presence anchoring them. He said, "Be still and know that I am God." Stillness is not weakness, it's spiritual intelligence. It's the discipline of saying, before I respond, I'll listen. It's refusing to let your emotions outrun your revelation. When you live from peace, you stop interpreting through pain. You begin to love from clarity, not confusion. You stop trying to control outcomes and start cultivating character. The moment you release the need to control, you create the space for God to move. And when God moves, he brings order to the chaos, purpose to the pain, and strength to the silence. Worry builds walls, peace builds bridges. One isolates you, the other aligns you. Don't let worry steal your discernment. Protect your peace as though your destiny depends on it, because it does. Every great decision flows from peace, not panic. So tonight, let this truth echo in your spirit. If worry is your language, peace will never be your portion. Let God restore your peace, because until he does, even love will sound like noise. Why do you keep searching for peace in people who are still searching for themselves? You keep pouring from an empty cup and calling it love, but hear me, peace is not found in people, it is found before them. When you make a relationship your source, you have already built your disappointment, because no human being was designed to be your emotional oxygen. They can complement your peace, but they can never create it. That power belongs only to God. Many of you are exhausted not because love is hard, but because you are carrying what only the presence of God was meant to sustain. You are praying for stability, but you are building your foundation on feelings. Feelings fluctuate, and so does your peace. You fall in love, you rise in anxiety, and then you wonder why your joy never lasts. You cannot bring chaos into a covenant and expect calm to grow. You cannot hide insecurity under affection and call it romance. Until peace becomes your identity, every relationship becomes your therapy. You start needing people to fix the cracks you refuse to face in solitude. You start confusing attention with assurance and closeness with healing. But love cannot fix what silence in God's presence was meant to reveal. This is why many relationships today are crowded but lonely. Two people together but still afraid, still unsure, still chasing validation through constant reassurance. You text every hour, you call every night, not because of love, but because of fear. Fear of being forgotten, fear of being replaced, fear of being unworthy. But fear is the greatest enemy of peace, and where fear governs, even love becomes performance. Listen to me carefully. Peace is not the fruit of perfect relationships. It is the reward of alignment with God. When you live from that place of inner rest, you stop negotiating your value. You no longer beg to be seen. You no longer panic when people pull away. Because the absence of man does not mean the absence of meaning. When you find peace in God, rejection becomes redirection. You begin to understand that sometimes He hides you not because you're unworthy, but because premature exposure would destroy you. Psychology tells us that people who lack internal peace often attract chaos. They find comfort in conflict because calm feels foreign. Spiritually, this means when your soul has not encountered divine rest, you will mistake turbulence for passion. You will chase what drains you and call it destiny. That is why peace must come before partnership. If not, you'll use love as medication for wounds that need revelation. God heals in solitude before He reveals in relationship. Stop asking someone to do the emotional labor that prayer was meant to do. Peace is not a gift others give you. It's a discipline you cultivate through surrender. Every time you choose to stay silent instead of arguing, you're building peace. Every time you forgive instead of retaliate, you're protecting peace. Every time you walk away from drama that feeds your ego but starves your soul, you're honoring peace. A relationship rooted in peace becomes unshakable. It's not perfect, but it's stable. It breathes honesty instead of anxiety, vulnerability instead of suspicion. Two whole people learning to serve, not two broken people trying to survive. That is divine partnership. That is kingdom alignment, and if you lose that kind of relationship, you don't panic. You trust because peace does not leave with people, it remains with purpose. So stop chasing peace through possession. Find it through presence, the presence of God. Because until peace becomes your normal, pain will always feel like love. And the day you realize that no person can complete your peace, that is the day you finally become whole. Have you ever loved someone so much that you began to lose yourself in the process? You called it love, but deep down you knew it was fear wearing the perfume of affection. Listen carefully. Love without peace becomes manipulation. When your love is born from insecurity, your affection turns into control. You start giving not because you're whole, but because you're terrified of being abandoned. You apologize for things that weren't your fault. You overextend to prove your worth. You shrink so they can shine, thinking sacrifice is the same as love. But what you call love might just be emotional slavery. True love flows from freedom, not fear. Anything that forces you to betray yourself in the name of keeping someone is not love. It's bondage. Many people today are not in relationships. They are in emotional hostage situations. One person holds the other's peace ransom, demanding constant validation, constant explanation, constant proof. You can't breathe, you can't think, you can't rest, because your sense of worth depends on whether someone texts you back. That's not love, that's addiction. Psychologists call it codependency, a cycle where your identity is defined by another's approval. Spiritually, it's idolatry. You have replaced God with man and expect the same peace, but man was never designed to fill a God-sized void. That's why no matter how much they give, it never feels enough. And because you're empty, you start controlling. You monitor their every move, analyze every silence, and call it care. But control is just fear trying to look responsible. You can't control and love at the same time. Love releases, control restrains, love listens, control accuses. Love says, I trust you enough to be yourself. Control says, be who I need you to be so I can feel safe. The painful truth is, many relationships die not from lack of love, but from lack of peace. You keep trying to fix the person instead of healing your perception. You think if they change, you'll finally be calm. But peace doesn't come from their consistency. It comes from your maturity. It comes when you learn that people can disappoint you and you can still be whole. It comes when you stop demanding that others regulate the emotions you never learned to master. You see, the moment love loses peace, it becomes performance. You start competing for attention, manipulating with silence and calling it wisdom. You begin to love from fear of loss, not from overflow. But love rooted in fear will always require control to survive. It cannot breathe in the atmosphere of freedom. This is why many relationships feel heavy. Too many rules, too many assumptions, too many invisible battles. Real love doesn't drain you, it disciplines you. It doesn't enslave you, it sanctifies you. When you love with peace, you stop needing to be right all the time. You stop using guilt as a weapon. You stop confusing silence for disinterest. You begin to love intelligently, not emotionally. You realize that love without boundaries isn't devotion, it's dysfunction. You stop giving out of desperation and start giving out of discernment. You understand that love is not about how much you can endure. It's about how much you can grow. The world says if it hurts, it's real. The Spirit says if it brings peace, it's pure. Stop measuring love by how deeply it wounds you. Start measuring it by how deeply it roots you in peace. The greatest relationships are not built by people who never argue, but by people who never weaponize their words. They don't fight to win, they fight to understand. They don't love to impress, they love to impact. And here is the final truth: love without peace may look intense, but it will eventually implode. You cannot sustain what constantly threatens your sanity. So, if your love costs you your peace, it was never God's design. Because when love is pure, peace is the evidence. Everyone wants love, but few want the maturity that sustains it. Passion gets you attention, but peace keeps you together. The proof of maturity is not passion, it's peace. Anybody can fall in love. It takes growth to stay in love. It's easy to start with butterflies and chemistry, but those things fade. Maturity is what carries you when emotions fail. It is the difference between relationships that thrive and those that collapse under pressure. Immaturity is loud. It reacts before it reflects. It blames instead of builds. It wants the thrill of connection without the responsibility of consistency. When you are immature, you confuse intensity for intimacy. You think the louder the emotion, the deeper the love. But real love is not always loud. Sometimes it is quiet, steady, and calm. A mature person doesn't shout to prove love. They show it through stability. Immaturity says, if you love me, you'll always agree with me. Maturity says, even when we disagree, I will honor you. Immaturity wants comfort. Maturity wants truth. Immaturity breaks things when it's angry. Maturity repairs even when it's hurting. You can't claim to love someone and yet be careless with their peace. Many relationships are struggling not because love is gone, but but because maturity never grew. You are still ruled by feelings, not principles. You're still apologizing only when you're caught, not when you're convicted. You're still expecting your partner to read your mind instead of learning to communicate. You're still measuring love by gifts, not growth. But real relationships demand emotional intelligence, the ability to stay calm in conflict, to listen when your pride wants to talk, to forgive when your pain wants revenge. Psychology calls it self-regulation. Scripture calls it the fruit of the Spirit. Both mean the same thing. You must learn to master yourself if you want to master love. Every time you lose control, you lose authority in that relationship. Maturity is not perfection, it's self-awareness. It's saying, I was wrong, even when your ego burns to stay right. It's choosing patience when your impulse screams for reaction. That's strength. Weak people follow their moods. Mature people follow their mission. Immature love says, you make me happy. Mature love says, I choose to build joy with you. Immaturity wants to be understood before it understands. It wants constant affirmation, but refuses accountability. You can't grow like that. Growth requires friction. God uses relationships to expose the parts of you that prayer alone won't reveal. He'll use someone's weakness to mirror your own. He'll use conflict to teach you compassion. Because you don't measure maturity by how you act when things are easy, but by how you respond when peace is tested. There is no relationship without offense. The test is how you handle it. Some of you are praying for God to bless your relationship, but He's waiting for you to outgrow your reactions. He won't give you what your character will destroy. You can't build a peaceful covenant with a childish mindset. Passion is a fire. Peace is the foundation. Fire excites, but foundation endures. Learn to prefer peace over pride, clarity over chaos, principles over pleasure. When you mature, you stop chasing relationships that excite your emotions and start pursuing ones that expand your destiny. You stop choosing people who mirror your brokenness and start aligning with those who mirror your purpose. Maturity turns relationships from emotional games into spiritual growth. So stop asking for perfect people and start becoming a peaceful one. Because love may start with passion, but it survives on peace. And if you can't protect peace, you're not ready for partnership. Passion builds moments, but peace builds marriages. And until you choose peace over performance, you'll keep mistaking chemistry for covenant. How many of us are still bleeding from wounds we swore were healed? You can't build a covenant on a battlefield, still soaked with your past pain. You can't carry yesterday's trauma into today's relationship and expect it to bloom. Some of you are not in love. You're in therapy, calling it love. You're trying to make someone atone for what someone else did to you. You are demanding a kind of perfection from them that your past stole from you. And deep down, you know it. Every argument becomes a trigger. Every silence feels like betrayal. And every misunderstanding becomes proof that love will always hurt you. But that's not love talking, that's trauma. And until you confront it, you will keep reliving it, just with different faces. The danger of unresolved pain is that it distorts perception. Psychology calls it projection. You see through the lens of what you've been through, not what's actually happening. So when someone offers peace, your wounds interpret it as indifference. When they try to love you gently, your fear calls it weakness. When they ask for space, your insecurity calls it abandonment. You begin to fight shadows and then wonder why your relationships feel haunted. You cannot expect healing in connection if you refused correction in solitude. God heals in the secret place before He reveals in public. But many of us rush out of recovery because loneliness feels unbearable. We want to escape pain instead of facing it. So we enter relationships half, whole half, healed, hoping love will finish the job. But love doesn't fix what you keep hiding. It only magnifies it. That's why the same cycle keeps repeating. Different people, same story. It's not that everyone is toxic, Sometimes it's that your pain keeps choosing what feels familiar, not what is healthy. The human brain is wired for familiarity. Trauma rewires you to find comfort in dysfunction because chaos feels like home. That's why a calm relationship feels boring to someone used to emotional turbulence. Your nervous system has adapted to pain. Healing then isn't just emotional, it's neurological. You must retrain your soul to believe that peace is safe. That trust doesn't mean danger. That love doesn't always end in loss, and that requires confrontation. Healing is not pretending it didn't happen. Healing is facing the memory, the betrayal, the disappointment, and forgiving not because they deserve it, but because you deserve peace. Forgiveness is not approval of what they did. It's refusal to let what they did define you any longer. Every day you carry resentment, you're drinking poison and expecting them to suffer. You are delaying your destiny because of someone who has already moved on. Stop letting ghosts govern your present. Stop rehearsing pain as if it's your identity. God cannot fill a heart that's still occupied with bitterness. You cannot embrace new love with arms still chained to the past. Healing is holiness. It's the purification of your emotional altar. That's why God isolates you before elevation. He will pull you away, not to punish you, but to detox you from the noise that kept you broken. So, if you're single and healing, don't despise that season. That's your surgery. Don't call it delay, it's preparation. You are being rebuilt, so that when love finds you again, it finds you whole. And when you are whole, you no longer attract brokenness. You attract peace. You no longer beg to be understood. You communicate with wisdom. You no longer react from fear. You respond from security. Stop trying to skip the process. You can't rush restoration. God is not just trying to give you a relationship. He's trying to make you ready for one. And here's the truth. If your scars are still bleeding, don't call it love. Call it recovery. Heal first, so your next relationship doesn't become your next wound. Because an unhealed heart will always turn blessings into burdens. And until you let God treat the infection, you'll keep calling pain your destiny. The real miracle is not finding love. It's becoming whole enough to sustain it. What if I told you that every relationship in your life is a classroom and peace is the exam? God doesn't send people to entertain you. He sends them to expose you. Every divine relationship is a test of patience, of humility, of truth. You think you're learning love, but God is teaching you peace. Because love without peace becomes warfare. Many of you are fighting battles that don't need to exist, simply because you've not learned the discipline of guarding peace. Relationships are not just emotional playgrounds, they are spiritual assignments. Every connection reveals something about your heart. Some people expose your pride, others reveal your fear, and some uncover how deeply you've misunderstood love. You can't claim to love someone while constantly disturbing their peace. Love is not supposed to drain you, it's supposed to develop you. But here's the problem. You want partnership without pruning, intimacy without introspection, connection without correction. You want to be understood, but you refuse to be transformed. That's why every argument feels like an explosion, because your ego keeps sitting on the throne of your emotions. In psychology, they call it emotional reactivity. In scripture, it's called the absence of self-control. Either way, it kills peace. The greatest enemy of relationships is not distance, not disloyalty. It's pride disguised as personality. You say, that's just how I am. But that's not personality. That's unhealed pain hiding behind identity. God gave you relationships not to affirm your brokenness, but to confront it. That's why some of you keep attracting the same kind of people. They are mirrors, not mistakes. You can't graduate from a lesson you keep refusing to learn. Until you master peace, God will keep re-enrolling you in the same classroom. Peace is not passive. It's power under control. It's learning to respond with wisdom when your emotions demand reaction. It's knowing when to speak and when silence becomes strategy. Some of you talk so much you destroy the soil peace could grow in. You call it transparency, but it's actually insecurity shouting for validation. Others withdraw so deeply that silence becomes punishment instead of maturity. Both extremes are emotional sabotage. Real peace is balance. It's strength under restraint. It's being able to love fiercely without losing your inner calm. The Bible says, "Blessed are the peacemakers, and not the peace talkers." It takes strength to be a peacemaker, because peace doesn't mean avoiding conflict. It means confronting it with grace. It means refusing to let temporary emotions destroy eternal covenants. It means saying, "I value this relationship too much to let my pride win." Every divine relationship requires spiritual intelligence. You can't build kingdom partnerships with worldly patterns. The world says, protect your pride. God says, guard your peace. The world says, win the argument. God says, win the relationship. You can't claim spiritual maturity if every disagreement turns you into an emotional storm. There's a difference between defending truth and destroying peace. Sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do is stay silent until you can speak from love, not ego. Every time you protect peace, you grow. Every time you choose humility over hostility, you evolve. Because peace is not weakness, it's wisdom. It's not the absence of power, it's power properly managed. God uses relationships to shape your character for destiny. You pray for elevation, but God answers by sending people who test your patience. You pray for love, but He gives you someone who triggers your healing. Don't run from those lessons. They are divine instruments of growth. When you understand that, you stop fighting people and start fighting your pride. You stop demanding peace from others and start cultivating it within. And here is the truth. When both partners choose peace over ego, the relationship becomes unshakable. Because peace is not just a feeling, it's the foundation of divine love. And until you learn to protect peace, every relationship you touch will crumble under the weight of your unhealed self. The true mark of maturity is not how loudly you love, but how quietly you keep peace. Because peace is where God lives, and where peace dwells, love never dies.